Weather forecast is familiar in our life, but they were impossible in people's eyes 160 years ago. Today, let Harry introduce this year's highly rated hot movie, The Aeronauts, to see how scientists in the 19th century dealt with the impossible. The story began with an ambitious young scientist immersing himself in meteorological forecasting. Within 3 years, he recorded more than 1,000 meteorological data. Since then, he had become the talkative guy and the stubborn guy in his colleagues' words. Why he was said to be the stubborn guy? That was because James Glaisher thought that, through complete data, it was possible to forecast the weather. But in the eyes of his colleagues, the weather forecast was like winning the lottery, both were baseless. Moreover, the weather forecast that James had been giving until then hadn't been correct at all. He said that the sky would be bright, but as soon as he came outside, it rained heavily. He said the sky would be clear, but the truth was that it's snow everywhere. Because of that, everyone laughed at him. I say, James, if first follow the opposite of your weather forecast, it may be a little bit useful. Faced with these questions and ridicule, James decided to take the risk. He had to fly to the sky to get more accurate data to probe the secret of the atmosphere. But in 1860, no one had yet known the Wright brothers. If you wanted to go to the sky, there was only one way. It was a hot air balloon. However, a poor man like him didn't have enough money to afford it, if he wanted to sit in a hot air balloon to go to romantic Turkey. He just had to come to the rich lady Amelia. She was a hot air balloon pilot, although her husband died a long time ago, she had a lot of experience. Amelia hesitated, but was eventually touched by James's sincere heart, and agreed to join this risky adventure plan. They had to reach a height no one could reach before, breaking the 7,000-meter record the French had set. James could also take this opportunity to observe meteorological data. When the news just spread out, people in London were very looking forward to it, many people donated for them, and literally created the most solid hot air balloon in history. Everything had been prepared. One morning with good weather, James's adventurous journey officially began. Amelia, standing on the balloon, enthusiastically proclaimed to everyone, "Today we are going to change the world, a history for England will be made." That day was the first time James had been in the hot air balloon, and perhaps would be the last. Let's look forward to it together, everyone. In the presence of everyone, the hot air balloon gradually flew into the sky. Amelia put on her coat and turned to remind James, "You should put on your oilskins. Once it rains, you will be gone." But James ignored it. He was still attached to record data. 1,645 meters, 17 degrees Celsius. He carefully stuffed the piece of paper into the box. He took out a pigeon from a wooden trunk. I must say that James was really thoughtful. If he couldn't return, this pigeon could still take notes back to the laboratory. The balloon went into the clouds. The two were chatting back and forth, then Amelia suddenly heard thunder. "Are we still sure this weather will hold? Because my instinct is telling me. It is going to rain." James also had an ego. "Every reading that I took this morning was quite clear." As soon as he finished speaking, James was hit in the face by a huge raindrop. Even more so, the hot air balloon shook violently in the wind. James was unsteady and was directly knocked down to the floor. Fortunately, Amelia had many experiences. There are 2 ways to break a storm. The safest way is up. Get out of the way, let me. Amelia was just about to act when a gust of wind blew, a thin rope was suddenly broken. Amelia fell out of the balloon and could fall from over 1,000 meters to the ground at any time. In the nick of time, James grabbed Amelia's hand, and used all his strength to pull Amelia up. After that, no one dared to lose their focus. They clung to the hot air balloon, shaking up and down with it. Fortunately, not long after that, the hot air balloon successfully went over that storm cloud, and reached the clear blue sky. The rainbow appeared in the distance, the sea of clouds was right below them. Coming back from death, James couldn't help but shout out loud. To raise the air from earth to the highest skies, to feed on flowers and weeds of glorious features. I'm finally going to the sky. Looking at the familiar and unfamiliar sky before her eyes, Amelia also had mixed feelings. 2 years ago, her husband Pierre Wren, while exploring, had fallen from a hot air balloon and lost his life. From then on, she didn't fly that high anymore. Now she once again crossed 9 cloud floors, but her husband was not there anymore. Amelia recovered and was planning to deal with the wound on James's head, when a yellow thing caught her attention. "Am I dizzy? Aren't these rare yellow butterflies?" At that time, thousands of yellow butterflies surrounded them. This romantic and majestic butterfly storm scene was true to the old saying, "This scene is only in heaven, few people can see it." No longer being obstructed by storms, the hot air balloon kept soaring. The needle on the measuring instrument reminded him that the meaningful moment was about to come. 6,960, 6,970, 6,980, 7,000 meters. History had been rewritten. James and Amelia had set a new record. At this moment, screaming could not express their feelings anymore. Amelia solemnly took James's hand and said, "Thank you for taking me up in your balloon, Mr. Glaisher." James also replied with thanks. The moment he had been waiting for his entire life had finally come true. The pigeon was released again. James couldn't stop smiling. We're rising even more quickly now. It's because of the air's thinner. This is exactly what I thought before. And at that moment, Amelia also gradually felt the air's getting cold. Now is the time to put your oilskins on. Unexpectedly, James ignored everything and said, didn't bring any oilskins. They proved extremely heavy. The equipment was essential. The weight limit was essential. What? After hearing this, Amelia was dumbfounded. He still kept his thermometer, large wooden trunk, and the pigeons, but he didn't bring the most important warm clothes. Are you crazy? We'll freeze. We need to go down now. But James was a scientist, research was more important than his life, he wouldn't give up that easily. If it's cold, keep moving. With every layer of air, we are traveling into an unknown. So, with every layer of air, we are traveling closer to the sun. Then it will warm again. Now every discovery will change the world. Look at the stars, look at the writing on the balloon. Surely, the sky lies open. Let us go that way. Change the world, how familiar those words were. She recalled some nights before. In fact, at first when James invited her, Amelia had declined. Until James's colleague John True reached out to her. He took out research at a height of 40 meters book, and told Amelia that study was undertaken by James. You must know, a few are given the chance to change the world. You've been assigned a responsibility, Miss Wren. You have to meet it. It was this conversation that made Amelia oscillate, helping her step out of the haunting of her husband's death. The impossible mission was about to come. Amelia slowly came to reality. She told James that, now, you understand there will come a time, when we go no further. Do you understand that decision will only be mine? I have to be sure this is safe. During the conversation, the hot air balloon reached 8,070 meters. The current air temperature was minus 15 degrees Celsius. The hot air balloon formed a layer of ice. Two people in the hot air balloon were also freezing that they could not say a word, they trembled to take notes. James took out the pigeon from the wooden box, but what he took out was just a cold corpse. The pigeon was frozen to death. If it kept happening like that, people would be frozen too. The air was thinner and thinner, the balloon gradually went up higher. James impatiently began to want to lose weight, but in the sky, any movement could be dangerous. James' brain quickly lacked oxygen, there was blood from his nose and mouth. Amelia didn't find it a good sign. She immediately said that, it is time we descend. We're going to die unless we descend now. But even so, James was still stubborn. Your husband risked your life for his recklessness. I do the same, but for science. After hearing that, Amelia slapped James. You know nothing of my husband's death. Pierre died for saving me. It turned out that in the incident that year, Amelia stubbornly wanted to go high up, causing the hot air balloon to be ripped apart, so it fell quickly to the ground. Even if they put down all the sandbags, they still couldn't decrease the falling speed of the balloon. At that moment, Pierre, who loved his wife deeply, had made a decision. The heaviest person here is me, keep looking up. After saying this, Pierre jumped out of the balloon and then he died. Since then, it has always haunted Amelia. She didn't even dare step back onto the hot air balloon. God knew how much courage she had to collect to go to the sky this time. So she had to bring James safely back to the ground. James couldn't stand it anymore, and finally nodded in agreement. But then, the hot air balloon had turned into an ice ball, the air discharge valve was frozen, which made it impossible for them to land. James in the corner gradually fell into a coma. Amelia, alone with no other choice, just had to climb up to the roof of the balloon to open the valve. The bitter cold made her hands so cold that it turned purple, but she still didn't lose her mind. She fastened her safe belt, and continued to climb onto the roof. Once she got there, she gradually lost her strength, and was just following her habit. She kicked the valve with her high heel. After a few kicks, the heel broke the wooden frame, the gas gradually charged. To avoid exhausting gas too fast, Amelia used a little of her remaining mind to take off her shoe. But at that last moment, she fainted. The balloon moved, making her fall down. Luckily the safe belt had worked. When she opened her eyes, she found herself suspended in midair. Unable to rely on James anymore, Amelia had to rely on herself to return to the balloon. After she escaped death's hands, she had no time to worry about her injuries. She shook James crazily. Wake up, you can't sleep. Your strange two-tube device is doing something very peculiar, you know. What did you come here? You haven't finished your research yet. Even in a coma, when he heard the words research, James still woke up and ran to see the hygrometer. They had flown for 1 hour and 19 minutes, the height then was 8,717 meters above sea level. Temperature unknown. That equipment's been lost to us. This is of no great use, either. Our readings on the descent shall be less significant. Thank you, if it weren't for you, we would be dead. Two people on the hot air balloon gradually lowered, the air gradually warmed up again. They watched snowflakes falling in the sky. James thought of poetry. But whilst we may be able to explain the science behind an aureole or the falling snow, it's not possible to account for its beauty. As soon as he finished, Amelia immediately felt something was wrong. Do you notice something about the snow? It's not falling. When she noticed this, she quickly opened the gas vent valve, and at the same time told Jamie that, if the gas vent valve opened, the hot air balloon would fall quickly, we need to lose weight. A lot of weight. At that point, James ignored everything, he even threw the chest out, then climbed up, cut off the balloon basket. It's the heaviest weight. Quick. However, even if the basket was cut off, the balloon still fell down too fast, just like an arrow. It was at this moment that the life and death dilemma reoccurred. Amelia decided to give up her life. How were James able to just sit there and looked at this? In that dangerous moment, a thought appeared in his head. We sever the cord keeping the balloon in shape. It's either both of us or neither of us. Then, a giant parachute flew up, the balloon turned into a landing parachute. This way worked. The two lays on the parachute frame, passed through the branches, and fell to the ground. They struggled to get up. James and Amelia looked at each other and laughed. This miraculous adventure finally ended in a surprise. The main plot of The Aeronauts may be a bit cliché, but it truly deserves to be a movie with the best acting, dangerous scenes, and makes people's hearts flutter. The thing worth mentioning is that this movie was adapted from a true story. In those years when science hadn't yet developed, many great people devoted themselves to science and research to make history. Besides, this movie also teaches us that the record is for the break, just like Harry here is not satisfied with his achievement today. I always aim to have 10,000 fans. Of course, this must depend on your help. If you like the movies that I review, remember to like, follow and share to help me achieve my dream sooner.